A few years back, I went on a camping trip with some really close friends. We'd been planning it for nearly a year because we were all itching to escape the chaos of the city and get lost in the pure, unspoiled beauty of nature. There were 5 of us, me, Sarah, Michael, Lisa, and Jameson. Since high school, we'd been tight-knit. Honestly, I thought this trip was going to be the highlight of our year, but looking back, I couldn't have been more wrong, and I'd soon learn just how wrong I was. Our backpacks were heavy with supplies, weighed down by everything we thought we'd need, but even with that burden we felt eager and upbeat as we left the trailhead. The weather was clear, and we kept a steady pace, winding through the woods. At first the trail was gentle, ascending gradually, then dipping down into shallow ravines before climbing back up. We joked, cracked stupid jokes, and laughed a lot. It was good to be away from screens and schedules, just us and the promise of a campfire and a cookout waiting for us. By late afternoon, we'd covered quite a bit of ground. Since we didn't plan to set up camp for a couple more hours, we stopped in a small clearing tucked beneath a low hill. Felt almost cozy, like it sheltered us from the world. We dropped our packs, sprawled out on the ground, and took out sandwiches and water bottles. The leaves rustled gently in the breeze, and a distant bird called out now and then. The woods around us were unnaturally quiet, almost still, and that stillness made it feel like we had found a special place, a rare moment in time. But I was wrong about that, and for all the wrong reasons. A few minutes passed, and Dave, one of my friends, got up, dusted off his jeans, and then headed off toward a small cluster of trees, saying he needed to take a leak. We barely paid him any mind, too busy eating and stretching out our stiff muscles. The seconds ticked by, and we continued chatting quietly until suddenly, everything was shattered by the most terrible sound I've ever heard. It was a scream, raw, guttural, horrifying, that cut through the woods like a chainsaw tearing through metal. It wasn't just a cry of pain or shock. It felt primal, like it reached all the way into the deepest part of your brain, flipping every switch to full panic mode. We all shot up, eyes wide, hearts pounding, and darted toward the source of the scream, crashing through the brush with branches snagging at our clothes. About 30 yards away, we found Dave, crumpled on the ground. His hands clawed at his leg, which was caught in a rusted, old bear trap. The jaws had snapped shut around his ankle, and he was screaming no, making guttural sounds, and his face was pale and covered in sweat. Blood pooled beneath his leg, soaking into the dirt, and the jagged metal bit deep into his flesh, making my stomach turn violently. Jenna, another of my friends, dropped to her knees beside him, trembling and clutching her hands together as she blurted, oh God," not knowing what she should do. Rob swore softly under his breath, pacing in tight circles, visibly shaken. James just froze, staring at the gruesome scene. I forced myself to get closer, and that's when I saw that the trap looked ancient, trusted chain, buried deep in the ground, probably abandoned for years. It looked like no one had touched it in ages, left to rust away until Dave's unlucky foot found it. Suddenly, James snapped out of his daze, dropped beside Jenna, and said, "I've seen this kind of trap before." He ran his fingers along its edges, trembling as Dave whined and gasped for breath, short, sharp breaths now. His blood was staining James' hands as he worked, and after what felt like forever, James finally found the release lever hidden beneath dirt and rust. He instructed Rob and me, "Hold him steady," and we grabbed Dave's shoulders, pinning him down as he thrashed and wailed, pain obviously extreme. Jenna kept holding his hand, whispering reassuring words I wasn't sure he could even hear. Then James pressed down on the lever with both hands. The jaws resisted for a moment, then snapped open with a loud clang, and Dave's screams intensified as the full weight of the trap was finally released. I looked down and immediately wished I hadn't. The flesh was torn wide open, revealing bone beneath mangled meat. We hurriedly carried Dave back to the clearing, his screams fading into muffled whimpers, and Jenna swiftly grabbed her first aid kit, bandaging his leg as best she could. The blood soaked through the wrappings almost instantly. Rob pulled out a pistol from his backpack, something he carried just in case, held it low while scanning the trees around us, trying to prepare for whatever might come next. We quickly discarded most of our gear. There was no time to set up camp and decided we had to get out of there. Dave, supported by James and me, with Jenna still tending to his leg and Rob with his gun, led us down the trail. The woods that once felt peaceful now seemed hostile, tense, almost dangerous. The air was thick with dread. It had been paradise earlier, but now it felt like a living nightmare spinning out of control. The adrenaline helped us make decent progress at first. Dave's skin looked almost gray, and his head kept slipping against my shoulder as he pleaded for us to slow down. The blood loss was obvious, leaving a trail behind us as we moved. We knew we had to keep going, but then everything got worse. When we were halfway back to the car, a sharp crack suddenly shattered the silence. A shot whizzed past my head so close that I felt it skim past my ear. Someone yelled, and we all hit the ground, dragging Dave behind a fallen log. Another shot rang out, splintering bark above us. Rob firing wildlibegan, returning fire, yelling for us to run as he tried to cover our escape. James and I, with Jenna close behind and Rob firing constantly, fumbled to get Dave upright, stumbling through the underbrush. Rob kept shooting, adrenaline making him brave, but I could see the panic in his eyes. Kept darting behind trees, firing blindly. The woods erupted with chaos, the crack of gunfire bouncing off every tree. Shots sounded close and far away, then far again, confusing us all. Branches whip us across the face, nearly tripping us as we kept moving. Dave had lost a lot of blood, but his survival instinct kicked in, and he surged forward, hopping like a man possessed. Rob caught up, panting, reloading. I felt my lungs burn, legs scream, but we kept pushing. I could see the faint outline of the car through the trees, and just when I thought we might make it, another final shot cracked behind us, then silence. We didn't stop, didn't look back. We just headed for the vehicle, shoving Dave into the back seat, blood smearing everywhere inside. Jenna pressed fresh bandages into his leg, and James kept the engine running while Rob kept a cautious eye on the woods with his pistol still ready. As I slammed the passenger door shut and roared onto the road, I knew Dave was alive, but barely. Our entire driven 20 minutes of winding through the forest was a blur. I kept trying to keep him awake, talking to him, but a small voice in my head kept whispering that he might die. When we finally reached the hospital after nightfall, we burst into the ER in a frantic rush. They took Dave straight away on a stretcher. We collapsed in the waiting room, exhausted, covered in dirt and blood. An hour later, a doctor came out and told us Dave wasn't going to die, but his leg was a disaster. He'd need surgery, possibly more than one, and might never walk the same again. Police officers arrived next, taking our statements about the trap, the gunfire, and Dave's injury. We told them everything: trap, the shots, but there was nothing to help identify who was shooting at us. We hadn't seen the shooter, hadn't interacted with anyone out there, so we couldn't give them a suspect. The police promised an investigation searching the woods for evidence, but their tone didn't inspire much confidence. They said they'd look, but the search went nowhere, and the shooter's identity has remained a complete mystery. Dave's parents called often, hoping for updates, but nothing ever came of it. We never went back to those woods. Whatever we left behind, the gear, the trap, became just a grim monument to that terrible day. Thankfully, Dave recovered. He bears a nasty scar, but he's walking again, and he's doing well in rehab now. Even now, we've only talked about it a couple of times, late at night over drinks, and every time the words just die in our throats, leaving behind questions we'll never have answers to. Who set that trap? Who fired those shots? We know we'll never know. It feels pointless to even try to imagine, and we've never gone hiking there again. The woods no longer feel inviting. The sound of Dave's scream still echoes in my mind sometimes. We survived that day, but something in us broke, something that never healed, just like Dave's leg. And I swear he feels the same way. A few years later, I left my job as a U.S. Marshal and started writing my autobiography. I want to share a dramatization of what I believe was the most unforgettable chapter of my career. I'm not much of a writer, so forgive me if this isn't perfect, but if you find it compelling enough to use in a video, that's all I need. It all began late one Sunday in October 1986. I was sitting at home watching highlights on TV when the phone rang, and I picked it up cautiously. Since no one calls past 10 p.m. unless it's urgent, I figured it was important. It was my SD supervisory deputy, and all he said was, "Be at the federal courthouse at 8 a.m. for a task force briefing." I'd been a deputy U.S. Marshal for almost 4 years, then enough to recognize that when something big was brewing, that's typically how it started. No details about the target, no location, just the date and time for the briefing. Once I heard task force, I knew we were probably after a top priority fugitive. But what I didn't realize was how strange and unsettling that day's operation would turn out to be. Next morning, I drove to Spokane County Courthouse, met with my SD, and headed to a conference room on the second floor. Inside, there were already a half-dozen guys in suits, polos, and duty gear, mostly fellow marshals, but also an FBI agent from the local field office. Before 8 a.m. hit, the room filled with a few more marshals from Seattle, some state troopers, and detectives from Spokane PD. Small talk started as everyone sipped coffee, but it stopped abruptly when the chief deputy marshal entered with an assistant U.S. attorney. The chief marched up to the speaker stand, set his coffee down, and cut straight to the point. "Listen up, we have got a high-priority arrest on our hands, and it's going to be tough. The fugitive's name is Raymond Ridgway. He's 42, stands about 6'2", lean build, with red hair and dark brown eyes. Notable scars on his palms, tattoos on his hands and fingers. He's wanted on 4 counts of homicide in Idaho, 2 in Oregon, and 2 counts of murdering federal officers, after ambushing 2 FBI agents last year." The chief paused, glancing at his notes. "Most reports say he's armed and he won't hesitate to shoot. This guy's dangerous, cunning, unpredictable, and extremely violent. You need to keep your wits about you when bringing him in." Murmurs ran through the room, and the chief kept speaking. They'd received a tip, narrowed down his location to a tough area near the Canadian border, a remote part called Ula Peak. Using aerial imagery, they believed Ridgway was holed up in one of 3 caves up there, most likely alone but heavily dug in. Elevation was around 85 feet, with steep approaches from all sides, and snow had just started falling, creating a narrow window of opportunity before weather trapped everyone out. The assistant U.S. attorney then confirmed the legal authorized warrant for arrest, with lethal force authorized if necessary. We'd stage out of Winthrop, the nearest town, and drive over rugged terrain to get close. The plan was to split into 3 teams, one to push the summit, another to flank and cut off escape routes, and a third to set the perimeter. Weather was our clock, so we'd move at first light. "Any questions?" One marshal from Seattle asked about the FBI agents who'd chased Ridgway earlier. The chief looked nervous as he explained that those 2 agents had tracked Ridgway's last known hideout outside Boise. A woman there tried to resist getting out when they tried to evacuate her, possibly setting them up for an ambush. The room went quiet as everyone registered how dangerous and unpredictable Ridgway was. The chief dismissed the questions about any other details, telling everyone to gear up, get some rest, and be ready at dawn. The following morning, we loaded into SUVs, clicked through winding roads, and finally reached the trailhead near Ula Peak. From there, it was a tough, hours-long climb through snow and rocky terrain, with the team splitting at various points. One ascending the summit, others flanking from different directions. By midday, we reached the top, and I distinctly remember the moment someone first pointed out something very odd. Dead birds and squirrels fleeing all around, in reckless spreads. No blood, no wounds, no signs of predation, just dead animals, seemingly having fallen from the sky or dropped dead for no apparent reason. My stomach tightened with unease. I grabbed my radio, contacted my team, and asked if they saw anything strange. The reply from Bravotwo teams descending the east slope was just as unsettling. Dozens of dead creatures all over, no injuries or signs of attack. It felt wrong, like something unnatural or deliberately staged. We kept pushing toward the summit, despite the eerie scene around us. Up near the summit, we spotted a cave, just a jagged opening, about 10 feet wide, tucked behind a slab of granite. That had to be where Ridgway was hiding. We moved cautiously, rifles ready, approaching the entrance. Inside was damp, cold, and strangely silent. No sounds, no signs of movement. We crept in, and there he was, Ridgway, sitting with his back turned to us at the deepest point, unmoving and emotionless. I yelled, "U.S. Marshal, drop your hands." But he didn't react. Just sat there still, rocking slowly back and forth, his head bowed. He looked leaner than in photos, red hair matted down. Charlie's team leader shouted again, ordering him down, but Ridgway didn't respond. He just kept rocking as if lost in his own mind. One of my guys, Tors, moved to grab his shoulder, but the moment he touched Ridgway, the man's body locked up as if hit by a live wire. He gasped, eyes wide, then collapsed, spasming violently. We froze in shock, guns trained, watching helplessly. Within seconds, Ridgway's body jerked, like he suddenly snapped out of it, eyes darting wildly around the cave, confused, unpredictable. We shouted for him to surrender, but he just smiled, hands behind his back. That's when we quickly zip-tied him, dragged him out, and rushed Tors to the medics. Was unconscious, breathing shallow, showing signs of having a seizure. Ridgway, meanwhile, was cuffed, eyes vacant, but with that eerie smile fixed on his face. He was loaded onto the helicopter along with Tors on a stretcher. We returned to the base, exhausted, with more questions than answers, and nothing about those strange Seinstead animals, his spasms, made any sense. Tors was put in a coma to stop the seizures, and he was unconscious for almost a week. When he finally woke up, he had no memory of the incident or why he'd collapsed. Ridgway was behind bars, refusing to talk, just sitting there in his cell, rocking back and forth as he'd done in that cave. The incident was mentioned only briefly in the official report, said to be an unrelated neurological event, probably epileptic or stress-induced. The dead birds on the mountain, treated as simply animals that were hunted or scavenged, completely ignored. No tests, no autopsies, no further investigation. All of this stayed buried, forgotten, even except in my own mind. I can't shake the feeling that somehow we saw a glimpse of something we shouldn't have. Those strange, unexplained signs, the eerie spasms, none of it adds up. The authorities seemed content with a quick explanation, brushing everything aside. But I've replayed it over and over. Ray's snapshot burned into my brain, sour smell of that cave, the way those animals just fell dead, how Ridgway's body spasmed as if he'd been hit with some supernatural shock. And the worst part, I'll never know what it was. Those loose ends, who set that trap, who was shooting at us. It all feels useless now. The whole encounter taught me that the agencies meant to protect us also shield us from uncomfortable truths, from what's lurking in places we aren't meant to see. That's why, even after nearly 40 years, I still carry it with me. It gnaws at me: the dead birds, the seizures, Ridgway's strange smile and vacant eyes. Nothing fits. Nothing explains the signs we saw, and I know I'll never get those answers. The woods are still out there, moving around without us knowing, and I can't help but feel some part of that mystery is still watching, waiting, just beyond what we can see. And that's what sticks with me, those unanswered questions that haunt me every day. I tell myself I should forget, but deep down, I know I never will. I won't know what that creature or force really was, those ghosts from the moon holes, as they say. And honestly, sometimes that's the scariest part of it all.